quick video there, which just sort of got us started thinking about 3 keys to effective coaching. And as he said in the video, it's about listening, so that's active listening, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. It's about thinking like a coach, not like their supervisor and their manager. It's about thinking in that moment, and it's about speaking like a coach, careful use of language. So to be an effective coach, you need some skills, attributes, abilities, characteristics, whatever you'd like to call them, and we could list them forever because they're ongoing, but we have some key skills for effective coaching that we can be developing or improving, and there's quite a lengthy handout which has got them listed, but we're going to go through them in a minute and discuss them just to give an overview of those. Many of them take practice, so let's have a look at them. As I just indicated, this is not an exhaustive list, but there are some key ones for being an effective coach, and we've got there setting goals, showing empathy, building rapport, a good communicator, being able to ask questions, being positive and empowering, and giving feedback. So let's just go through those individually. First, I'd like to focus on setting goals, because coaching as an approach is all about goals and about getting people to focus on them. So understanding what makes a clear goal that is well defined and will emotionally engage the coachee is key. We'll usually be following something like SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound, but that can be too formal. Like when we were talking about the fuel approach, it may be too much. Informal ones, maybe just where you're getting the coachee to tell you how they feel and give you a way of framing a goal that might not be specifically SMART. So for example, it might be about working with a difficult colleague, and the goal might just be to be able to develop a workable relationship over the next 3 months or something like that, which is not really a particularly SMART goal. But you need to understand that goal's got to have those sort of SMART contents in it for people to be able to follow it and to be able to hold them to it. The next I want to focus on is being a good communicator, and this really has a wider spectrum than what he was talking about in the video where he talked about active listening, because it includes active listening, but it's also about being able to guide a good conversation. It's about paying attention. Active listening is a skill in itself. It's not just about hearing what the other person said, but it's about emphasizing that, engaging them and showing that you're engaging with them and not just listening to them. You're giving them their undivided attention. And I think at the heart of that is shelving your own thoughts and concerns whilst you're listening. And that can be a challenge for a busy manager because you've got other things going on in your head. You need to show verbal signals that you're actively listening. So that's cues and things such as nodding, maintaining eye contact, occasionally summarizing what they've said. And the simplest approach I could talk about would be to try and get a genuine interest in the person and what they're talking about, so that it's not something you're putting on, so that it comes across. And that can be a challenge. It requires to focus on the things we talked about in self-awareness, your emotional intelligence. You need to know about yourself so that you can be sure that you're in the right sort of frame of mind, and that you can ask some questions at the right times that are not directives, that they're just sort of challenging or teasing little ideas out of people. So the next is showing or giving empathy, and empathy comes from sort of looking, listening, understanding, and I think not judging what you're seeing on your own values, beliefs or feelings. It's about trying to think about the other people's values, beliefs and feelings, and you'll get that from judging their emotional state. Some people say it's very difficult, and some people find it easier, but it's about experiencing it in a different way and trying to, I think the best phrase someone says, often the common phrase, is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. It's a critical skill for an effective coach, in fact for an effective manager, and it helps us show the other person that we're on their terms and we understand them and that we've got some sort of feeling of their emotions, and to do that you've got to be self-aware and understand your own emotions. I think empathizing well can sometimes be tiring and emotionally draining, especially if you're not used to it. because you need to invest emotionally in it for it to be real and for it to go somewhere. But if it's done well, it can be rewarding, fascinating. It can be enjoyable, and it certainly will help you be a more effective coach. The next one is asking questions. Questions, questions, questions. It's easy, isn't it? Just asking questions. Well, that's the point. Asking the wrong questions at the wrong time could cause problems in coaching. Great questions get great answers, and great answers lead to interesting conversations. And as we talked about perhaps in the fuel model, that's what you're trying to do, have a conversation. That's true in all walks of life, and especially as a manager or supervisor, and in coaching it can help you build strong working relationships. You get to know your employees better. You need to show you're curious, you're positive, and you're motivated to know more about them. If your attitude's right, then the question will come across better as well. So coaches need to use the right questions at the right time. And first of all, they're probably going to be open or probing questions. So open questions, how, what, when, why, and these elicit the coachee's thoughts, feelings and ideas, and then from them you can use further probing questions if you want to know more details about those things. As I said, you need to show an interest and curiosity, so the way you deliver the question can be important as well. But you need to ask the right questions, because the right questions will release some important things. The right question will focus attention. Open questions will prompt descriptive responses, leading to them considering or thinking about things or focusing on things that they've not thought about. As I said there, it will trigger new ideas. It can lead to areas that have not been considered, approaches that may have been dismissed. It can also develop the conversation and allow you to investigate those new ideas that they may not have thought of. And if you watch the resources, the Grow video, you'll see that happening. And thirdly, questions gain commitment. They can make a huge difference and direct someone to something. If you ask them a question about whether they're going to do it, it's more likely that they will do it than if the question wasn't asked. So you might be asking them why they need to make sure they do it, or how they think they're going to make sure they do it. An open question that gains commitment gets them to take ownership and has much more chance of them achieving it. So asking the right questions at the right time can be critical. I want to focus next on giving feedback. We talked lots about feedback in the first unit of self-awareness, and that was about receiving. This is more about and where to get it, and this is more about delivering feedback. The feedback we deliver in coaching needs to be observational, non-judgmental. It also needs to be clear, specific, and we need to focus on being constructive and focusing on the coachee's actions and the consequences of what's gone on. This is so that they can connect with it, and then they can reflect on the performance themselves, because it's not just about us telling them what they've done. That isn't to say there won't be any negative areas in there, but we just need to be careful about how we deliver it. It needs to be constructive, and to do that we can follow some key points. So the way feedback is delivered will differ depending on the situation and the person you're working with, and that's where you've got to build that relationship and know the person you're talking to. But there are a couple of key things, key factors that we can use, and one is to focus on the moment. What's going on, as he said in the coaching, this is about what's happening now in this situation, not feedback as their manager in general, and we don't want to be clouded by other things that have gone on. We're just talking about this coaching session. And the second is to give positive and constructive feedback, and some people say that's not easy, but we need to make sure that we're focusing it in the right way. That doesn't mean we're not going to talk about areas that need to improve, and notice I said areas for improvement there, not weaknesses. And there are a couple of things we can do to try and help that. As you can see, that my rough drawing here of the side of a bathtub, but don't worry about that too much. The key is at point 1 we need to start with a positive, even if that is just about talking about the fact that we're now here and that we're doing something about it. We're looking at improving something. So try and find a positive to start from, then look at the areas for improvement, and then finish on a positive note. And that can be focusing back on what we talked about at the beginning, or the fact that we've now got some actions and some ways we're going to move forward, but focusing and finishing on a positive note, so what they remember is a positive thing moving forward, will help massively in making sure your feedback is constructive. And finally, in all that, we need to make sure, particularly in coaching, that we're avoiding blame. Blaming people just causes a bad reaction, such as anger or disillusionment, or they'll even disengage. And the last thing we need in coaching is them to disengage with us. What we need to do is try and frame things as a request. So faced with a request, we're more likely to accept an option or reject it, but then we can enter into a negotiation. So for example, you might be asking them a question about, do they think this would have made a difference? Do you think that would have made a difference? Rather than, was it because you did this or you did that? And we elicit that better reaction. So we're still getting to the point, but we're trying to make sure that we avoid blame, because we're past the blame in the coaching session. What we're trying to do is sort out the problem, not decide who was at fault and why it was at fault. Next is about being positive and empowering people. Coaching requires encouragement, empowerment. That's what we're trying to get out of the employees, and the manager must work with the employees, and it's about building a one-to-one relationship, finding out what motivates them so we can improve their performance, and that has to be positive. You should always try and maintain a positive approach, even if things seem bad. You need to genuinely find something positive, because if not, your persona will give it away and pretending won't work. A positive attitude can work wonders, not only for the coachee, but for you as a manager. If you can get them to react positively, then your job's easier. They're more likely to have an input, they're more likely to ask questions, and they're more likely to give feedback if you're approaching it in a positive manner. We want improvement, so try and put those things out of your mind from the past. It's about focusing on the now, on the moment when we're doing the coaching, not the past. And finally, and probably the hardest to explain and the most important, is building rapport. As I said, it's really hard to put into words, but people have tried. People call it a state of harmonious understanding with an individual or a group. But whatever, it allows better and easier communication. It's about getting on well with someone, another person. And I find trying to find things that you've got in common, help it. And when it happens, you notice communication ease. It becomes more natural and therefore more effective, which is key in the coaching that we're talking about. The impact can come from a combination of things, and it's things we talked about, all the things we've just gone through, active listening, but maybe injecting a little bit of humor, as long as it's similar humor. Being non-threatening, being polite can have a massive impact. Showing empathy, being able to develop a conversation and letting them do some talking, and sometimes that needs to allow them time. Being non-judgmental, and also some simple non-verbal communications. First of all, and it surprises me how many people don't do it, managers particularly, smile. It works wonders in putting people at ease and trying to build some sort of positive relationship. And mirroring, and I don't want to go into it massively, but similar body language and position. It's no good if someone's quiet and reserved, thinking I'll be hyperly overactive and energetic, because that will make them feel more empowered and positive, because it doesn't work that way. You need to mirror their approach and then bring them with you in their formality as well. You're the manager and you might normally be quite formal, but this is about being their coach, so it might need to, if they're being informal, for you to be informal, or you might need to be formal first and then try and get them to relax and then become informal, so bringing them with you again. Breathing and energy levels, I mentioned before just now, if they're being very quiet and reserved, you being hyper and showing massive energy levels doesn't necessarily work, so you need to match their energy levels and match their language, their rate of speaking. By that I mean the speed, the tone and the pace that they're going through things. So just try and be like them to build that rapport. And they are just, like I said, that's not an exhaustive list, but there are a set of things that you need to think about in your approach to it, and there's more details in the handout. So the final thing in this sort of area that I want to talk about is considering learning styles. it makes sense that if people learn differently, as we discussed in the last unit, that as a coach we might need to consider this and take that into account. Remember, we talked about learning styles in the last unit when we were talking about self-awareness. We talked about auditory, people responding to sounds, descriptions; visual, people responding to images and demonstrations; and kinesthetic, people who like to do and experience things. We need to consider those when we're using our communication style. We also might make a choice of the type of model we use, and if we don't know, we might have to try and cover all three of those in the way we approach that person. What might be more interesting when we're considering coaching is looking at the other four main learning styles we looked at: activist, reflectors, theorists, and pragmatists. Because thinking about it, activists learn best when they're involved in new experiences, getting experience of doing things. So we might be advised to use the grow model with them, because they'll be happy to be thrown at the deep end, talking about objectives and plans straight away, and they might be happy to be involved in doing a difficult task straight away with an element of risk. For example, if we think they're not getting involved and taking leads enough, we might want to start saying, right, you're going to take control of a meeting. They might even chair that meeting as a goal straight away, because they might be happy to get involved with that. They're less likely to want to be drawn out in long, ongoing discussions and want to get straight into the planning and setting the goal session. So grow might be good for them, fuel probably not so good. On the other hand, reflectors want to look at things, discuss from different perspectives, and be given time to reflect and analyse. But they like to listen, observe, collect data. So in those sessions, it's going to be harder to get them to talk, which is part of coaching. So we may need to build in some planning and thinking time. We need to tend to be that they will tend to be quite conscious or conservative, and we may need to listen to their and spend some time listening and trying to get and draw their ideas out. Fuel may be a better model for them. Theorists, on the other hand, may want to talk too much. They like to assimilate new information, fit in the theories and the explanations. They have a tendency to be perfectionists and want to go through things step by step, which could be an advantage, but will need to keep the session quite structured. They can be detached and analytical, thinking about things in the theory way and not thinking about their emotions. And that could be a struggle, because we want them to talk about their feelings, the situations, and the issues. Then there's pragmatists. They're interested in the ideas if they work. They don't want abstract theories. They don't want to be talking about possibilities. They want to keep to the points, and they want to be subjective. Facts: how, what, why, when. Sort of problem solving. So fuel may not be the right model for them. They may want something like arrow. And then it's talking about the obvious links between the subject and what they're doing. So the reflection bit in arrow could be quite good there. And the chance to try things out. So we may want to use examples, as in asking them to role play situations or something about how things might go. All these things need to be taken into account, and whatever approach we decide, we need to have thought about these things, because we don't want to have a coaching session like you're going to watch in the next video. So watch the video of a bad coaching session example, make some notes, think about the things we've been talking about, and then we'll reconvene after that.